Found Duckling by EvaDragon. Chapter 5, New Family. Summary. Danny meets his new family. Danny finally gets to let Jazz, Sam, and Tucker know that he's okay. Notes. Wayne family ages. Alfred, immortal. Bruce, 46. Dick and Babs, 28. Cass, 24. Jason, 23. Tim and Steph, 19. Duke, 18. First semester college. Danny, 16. Damien, 14. Bruce had called an emergency family meeting. The only person not present was Tim. The only person who knew what the meeting was about was Jason, since he'd been with Tim and Danny from the beginning. The others likely knew what was coming, since this was a repeated problem with Bruce. Jason is the first to arrive, and although he's on edge about being in the same place as Bruce, he'll do it since he's getting a new brother. Steph and Cass arrive with each other since they'd been out shopping. Alfred arrived with Damien since Damien had been at an after-school workshop. Dick, Babs, and Duke had been the last to arrive. What is the meaning of this, Father? Damien demanded as he threw a glare around the room. Jason cackled. All heads except Bruce's whipped to him. Bruce sighed. Do you all remember the other day when we got a call about a random civilian being kidnapped and mistaken for Tim? There were a chorus of yeses that went through the gathered family members. Do not tell me that you are taking in yet another stray, Father, Damien practically growled. Danny is not a stray, Damien. Danny is in fact Tim's brother. A round of gas went through the room. We've already done the DNA test to confirm. It turns out that Danny was given up for adoption as a baby while the Drakes were on an archaeological dig in Egypt. That's why Tim never knew about Danny. He was given up the day he was born. Janet was pregnant while on the dig and apparently hid the pregnancy. Due to some unfortunate home circumstances, Danny was forced to leave. He's only been in Gotham for a few months. He originally came looking for his family, but only did a cursory search and found that the Drakes had passed away. He didn't connect Tim Drake Wayne with Jack and Janet Drake. He's been staying in a small apartment in Crime Alley, finishing online school, working at a coffee shop. He's expecting to start at Gotham University the next semester. So you're telling us that everything he said while essentially high on Scarecrow's fear gas was true? Dick said shrilly. Bruce nodded. Dick dropped his head to his hands and moaned. Black hair and blue eyes, check. Negligent home life, check. Tragic backstory, check. Teenage vigilante, double check. What even was this kid's life? Everyone except Jason was looking at Dick and Bruce for an explanation. Will he be joining us at night? Babs asked. He can't, Bruce replied hesitantly. What does that mean, can't? Damien asked with derision. There are laws in place that prevent him from being part of our nightlife. I don't know if you noticed, B, but being a vigilante ain't exactly legal, called Steph. Bruce heaved another sigh. I'm not talking about vigilantism. I'm talking about federal laws that the Justice League are working on taking down. For now, what you need to know is that there is a government organization that is sanctioned to capture and experiment on Danny's vigilante alter ego. A sharp hiss and intake of breath followed this statement. While I do not care if we tell him about our nightlife activities, we'll leave it up to him whether or not he joins us. Damien, in particular, looked like he was about to murder someone. For all of Damien's stoicism, the thought of government-sanctioned experimentation on a person thoroughly rankled him. So where are Casper and Timmers? Jason asked, breaking the shocked silence. Everyone except Bruce and Dick looked at Jason in confusion at the nickname. Danny's been through a lot in the last couple of days and was emotionally exhausted, so I took him upstairs to rest. Tim is with him, Bruce replied. Hopefully you'll be awake in time for supper. New brother, signed Cass with glee. Yes, Cass, Danny has agreed to let me take over legal guardianship. I will provide another layer of protection for him in case his previous legal guardians come looking for him. We haven't discussed adoption yet, Bruce said to the giggles of everyone in the room. He sighed again. He knew about the running joke in Gotham, and Danny had certainly fit the type. The family slowly devolved into a light-hearted fight over which character in Mario Kart was better. Bruce just sat back and let the conversation wash over him. Before we have dinner, I wish to inform everyone that our newest member wishes to be called Danny. He stated, and I quote, "The only people who call me Daniel are the ones who are trying to kill me," Alfred stated as he entered the sitting room. Everyone looked up at him in varying states of shock on their faces. He said, "What?" Jason growled. When I asked for clarification, he told me that the ghost didn't know any better since he was a baby ghost, and that particular problem has since been fixed. He did refer to another person, one he termed a Fruit Loop. He inferred this person kidnapped him more than once, has tried to manipulate him to denounce his family, and or has actively tried to kill him in the past. "Fuck!" Jason snarled. "Language, Master Jason," Alfred chastised succinctly. "I haven't had the chance to inform Master Tim of this yet, but I've also found that things like this don't tend to stay secret for long in this family. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've supper to prepare." With that, Alfred turned and walked away and disappeared into the shadows. Danny startled awake, phased out of the blanket, rolled off the bed, and came into a fighting stance, practically all in one nearly fluid motion. Tim could tell he was in that not quite fully awake state, so he slowly closed his laptop while also choreographing his movements, making sure that Danny knew that he was in the room so that Danny didn't mistake him for an enemy. "Huh? Tim? What happened?" Danny said blurrily, sleep thick in his voice as he finally started relaxing his fighting stance. Tim snorted and smiled happily at his brother. God, he had a little brother. Not that he didn't count Damien, but this one hadn't tried to murder him and was biologically related to him. "You basically passed out on Bruce. He carried you up to your room. Red Robin packed your stuff and met me so I could bring it over," Tim replied and indicated the few duffel bags by the door so Danny could unpack them later. His apartment had been abysmally deprived of just about anything personal. There had been a few model rockets, a few posters of NASA and outer space, and a few other knickknacks. His closet had also been depressingly bare, something that Tim was determined to fix in the upcoming days. "So the entire family is gathered for supper. You up for meeting them?" Danny thought about it for a moment, and then shakily nodded his head. "Yeah, I can meet them. You'll be there?" he asked, looking at Tim hopefully. "I'll be right next to you," Tim promised Danny. The two brothers made their way down to the dining room, with Danny getting more and more nervous as they went. Danny was holding onto Tim's sleeve like it was a lifeline. The dining room was loud and boisterous, and when the two brothers stepped in, it went silent. 8 pairs of eyes turned towards the two who had just entered the room. "Man, Timbers, he looks just like you." Dick was the first to break out of his stunned silence and cooed at both Danny and Tim. "You sure he's not a clone?" "Well, I've been cloned before, and all of them destabilized, except for Danny. That's Danny with an I. So, pretty sure I'm not a clone," Danny said, hopefully. Jason and Tim groaned in unison. The rest of the Bat Clan's jaws had properly dropped open. Bruce looked like he was sucking a lemon. "Master Danny, Master Tim, please have a seat." Alfred swooped in to save the day. Tim and Danny promptly took their seats. The dinner passed in a pleasant manner. Danny wasn't too sure how much of what Tim had been told had been passed to the rest of Tim's family, but they didn't ask too many questions other than the general get-to-know-you type questions. Danny was only too happy to answer those. Danny was overwhelmed, to say the least. He couldn't remember the last time he had such a normal, not that he knew the Wayne family was normal, he knew that there was something off about them. He just couldn't figure out what yet. Dinner. And the dinner didn't attack him. A fact he repeated. A fact which had sent most of the Waynes into an existential crisis once Danny had yet again explained the radioactive tendencies of ectoplasm to reanimate food stored in the fridge. Alfred was utterly appalled. And other than Jason and Tim, who already heard about the reanimated food, most of the Waynes and Steph and Babs looked like they were going to be sick. The family had decided that they were going to give Danny a few days to settle in before revealing their nightly activities. Tim had agreed to this. Danny was still healing from being vivisected, and he could tell that suddenly finding himself in the midst of the chaos that is a full family dinner was beginning to distress Danny. Danny began to shuffle in his seat, and Tim looked over to him, sensing his distress. Hey, not that this isn't great, but I'm done. Thank you for, everything. Danny squeaked out before retreating back to his room. Tim excused himself from the meal and chased after his brother. Danny, are you okay? Tim asked as he followed his brother into his room. It was just a lot. Growing up, we rarely had meals together, like as a family. Jack and Maddie were so involved in their work, they often forgot Jazz and me even existed. So meals were just me and Jazz, usually sitting in the living room doing homework over microwavable meals. Every once in a while they would remember, but then we would run the danger of if the food would be ecto-contaminated. The Mansons didn't really like me. The Mansons? You mean like Jeremy and Pamela Manson? You know them? Tim interrupted. Yeah, their daughter Sam, or well, she was probably introduced as Samantha, is one of my best friends. She's part of Team Phantom, and it's part of why her parents didn't like me. The other part is because of Jack and Maddie. I was the kid of the local town crazies, which incidentally made Sam like me all the more. Danny snorted at the memory. Tim was quiet, letting Danny talk through his almost panic attack. Sam is all goth and activism and against the mainstream. She decided that because I wasn't any of that I would make good friend material from the get-go. She sounds like a good friend, Tim said softly. She really is. She's loud and opinionated, but she was there when I needed her. I think her and Damien would get along like a house on fire. They have a lot in common. My other friend, Tucker Foley, fed me more often. But the Foleys had a bigger family and smaller budget, so although they offered, I felt bad taking them up on that too often, you know? Yeah, I can imagine, Tim said, leaning against Danny. He didn't know what it meant to go hungry, if for different reasons. That was one thing that both boys knew, a neglectful family. It's just that I went from just Jazz and me at meals, and then I lost everything. I haven't been able to call or contact them except for one single email since I've been here, to a whole-ass family. It was... yeah, Danny said around sniffles. He was not going to cry, damn it. They are chaos incarnate, Tim said sagely, while wrapping his arms around Danny. Oh, hey, I got you something. Meant to give it to you earlier, but kind of forgot. Tim jumped and raced to the desk and grabbed a box that he'd placed there earlier while Danny had been sleeping. He handed the box to Danny and waited for Danny to open it. Tim, is this a phone? Danny breathed out in wonderment. One of the latest models in Wayne Tech. Tim laughed at Danny's expression. benefits of being the co-CEO of Wayne Enterprises. And then, to Tim's horror, Danny started taking the phone apart. He didn't say anything, but watched as Danny dug out a small toolkit from one of the duffel bags, one of the few things he'd managed to pack in his mad dash for freedom. As he began to rearrange the phone's delicate inner workings, he explains exactly what he's doing to Tim. Me and electronics don't exactly get along. Specifically, anything with voice or audio recording. So, like cameras, CCTV, wire traps, and especially phones. Computers and laptops are 50-50. That's probably why there haven't been anything like tabloid or other articles about me. They can't get a clear picture. All pictures will come out really fuzzy and blurred, unless I'm actively drawing in my aura. But that takes more energy than me just letting it out, surprisingly. Anyways, Tucker and I figured out that if we bond just a bit of ectoplasm into the internal wiring of a phone, and voila! I've got a phone that won't explode, literally, or go all staticky when I use it. Danny proudly held up his new and improved latest model of Wayne Tech phone. Hey, Tim, would you like to meet them? Jazz, Sam, and Tucker, I mean? I would love to. Tim smiled at his brother. Danny quickly downloaded the private server that Tucker had set up for Team Phantom and then dialed. Tucker picked up on the first ring. Danny! The other screams. Hang on, let me go get Sam. She's in the other room. Then I'll contact Jazz. Hey, who's that with you? Once you got everyone on the line, I'll explain. Danny laughed as he watched his friend race into another room. Tim laughed with Danny. Soon enough, a young woman with black hair and violet eyes appeared on screen. The mascara on her eyes was decidedly running down as she squeezed Tucker. It's good to see you too, Sam, Danny said wetly. A few moments later, a red-haired young woman joined the video call. Tears immediately began streaking down her face. Oh, baby brother. Jazz breathed around her own tears. The now reunited Team Phantom spent a few moments just relishing in each other's presence, even if it was only virtually. The two still left in Amity Park hugged each other close as tears streamed down their faces. Jazz wrapped her arms around herself and Tim leaned against Danny. So, Danny, are you finally going to introduce us or what? Tucker said thickly after he blew his nose and wiped his face. You guys are never going to believe this. This is my older brother, Tim Drake Wayne. There was a pause, a beat, a stop in time, almost as if clockwork had called for a time out. Then it was pure and utter chaos on the end of the line. Tucker's face morphed into fanboy crush to end-all fanboy crushes. Sam's face morphed into something between disdain and awe that her best friend was now affiliated with money. Jazz's face was pure relief that Danny had found his family. Danny, how did you even find your family? The last email we got from you said that the Drake family was dead. Jazz asked, trying not to be suspicious and ruin Danny's newfound happiness. Well, about that. Apparently, about a week ago, I looked enough like Tim that I was kidnapped. Danny started to explain. Danny, dude, like what the fuck? That's like the opposite of laying low, Tucker snarked. I'm aware. Do you want me to finish or not? Danny deadpanned. Tucker motioned for him to continue. Anyways, the kidnappers called the Waynes, who have connections with the Bats. The Bats rescued me, and Red Robin said that I looked just like Tim. One DNA test later, and bam, I have an older brother. You, of all people, agreed to a DNA test, Sam asked, her voice full of suspicion. Well, let's just say I don't react the same way to Scarecrow's fear gas. And now Tim here is an unofficial part of Team Phantom, Danny says with jazz hands. The others groaned. One of them, probably Sam, let out a string of muffled curses. But the good news is that the Justice League is now aware of what's happening in Amity Park and the Ecto Control Axe, and are working on taking down the Axe and the GIW. Or so I've been told by the Bat Brigade. And you trust them? Sam asked with narrowed eyes. Yeah, actually I do. I can't explain it. When I got here earlier today, I've never felt so safe. And I feel that same sense of safety with the bats, at least the ones I've met. If you're sure, little brother, Jazz said with a soft smile. Danny had looked more relaxed than she'd seen in a long time, probably before his accident. I really am. But I'm gonna let you guys go for now. I have an early shift at my job tomorrow. Love you guys. You're still working? Tucker exclaimed incredulously. Yeah, for now, we're holding off announcing that I'm related to Tim, at least until after the Axe and GIW are taken care of. At least if I keep going to my normal everyday job, it should keep those idiots in white at bay. Why would a ghost need a job? But if I go public, then the Fruit Loop will see, and that's the last thing I want right now. So for now, I'm just Danny Nightingale, part-time barista, full-time online student. Alright, Danny dude, but you better keep in touch now that you have access to fancy Wayne tech, or we'll kill you again. Everyone on the phone laughed at the non-threat, and then they hung up. Danny sat in the pervading silence, trying to work up his courage. Hey, Tim? Yeah, Danny, what is it? Tim asked softly, knowing that Danny was having a hard time expressing himself. Can you, stay? At least for a bit, Danny asked as he flushed in embarrassment. Sure, I'll stay, Tim replied. Danny went to the bathroom and got ready for bed. Tim made a mad dash for his room and quickly performed his own nighttime routine. He met Danny just as Danny came out of the bathroom, his hair still wet from a shower. They both climbed into Tim's bed, and Danny snuggled into Tim's muscular arms. Danny started carding his hand through Danny's hair, and it didn't take long for Danny to nod off. Tim sent a quick message to Bruce that he would be off patrol for the night. Tim took a quick selfie of Danny snuggled into his side, which he then sent to the family group chat. Tim put his phone on Do Not Disturb and then pulled the blanket over himself and his brother. If he could keep the nightmares away from Danny for one night, then it would be worth it. Notes. Bruce. So, Damien, you're bringing home another stray, aren't you, Father? Jason cackles in the corner. Everyone. What? Bruce. Meet Danny, Tim's brother. Cass. New brother for everyone. Danny. Not a clone. I would know. I have a clone. Everyone. What the fuck? Can you please stop trauma dumping?